Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. 5 soldiers shot and wounded at Fort Stewart in Georgia. The suspected shooter, an Army sergeant, is in custody. The Texas Senate Committee on Congressional Redistricting meets on the proposed Republican-drawn district lines map designed to win Republicans 5 more U.S. House seats, while Texas House Democrats continue to remain out of state to keep the House from getting a quorum to pass that map, and the Republicans are threatening to arrest or expel them, and other Democratic-led states are continuing to look at maps of their own in retaliation. We'll get the latest on this standoff, how it might play out, with Texas Tribune reporter Gabby Birenbaum. President Donald Trump imposes an additional 25% tariff on India because of India's purchase of Russian oil, for a total of 50% on India, after President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff meets Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow about the war in Ukraine, President Trump calling it a highly productive meeting. Plus, Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, says she's running for governor. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. cancels $500 million in mRNA vaccine research, and a ceremony at the Peace Memorial in Hiroshima, Japan, on this 80th anniversary of the first use of a nuclear weapon by the U.S. during World War II. NBC News reporting that gunfire erupted at Fort Stewart in Georgia this morning, prompting the base commander to lock down facilities in the wake of this active shooter incident. Fort Stewart said in a statement that 5 soldiers were shot. They were treated on scene, transported to a hospital for further treatment. All victims are in stable condition. The shooter was apprehended, and there is no longer an active threat to the community. The suspect was identified by officials as Sergeant Cornelius Radford, 28 years old. No motive was announced. The Army base is about 40 miles southwest of Savannah. That was from NBC News. While this was unfolding, the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt put out a statement. The president has been briefed on the shooting at Fort Stewart in Georgia. The White House is monitoring the situation. Similar statements coming from the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, the governor of Georgia, members of the U.S. House and Senate from that state as well. Later, President Donald Trump, as he was hosting Tim Cook of Apple CEO, at the White House in the Oval Office, announcing a $100 billion investment by that company, made some remarks about what happened in Georgia.
Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about the shooting at Fort Stewart in Georgia. As you know, 5 people were seriously wounded and 2 very, very seriously hurt around 11 o'clock this morning. The shooter is now in custody, and the Army Criminal Investigation Division is on site to ensure that the perpetrator of this atrocity, which is exactly what it is, will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The entire nation is praying for the victims and their families, and hopefully they'll fully recover, and we can put this chapter behind, but we're not going to forget what happened. We're going to take very good care of this person that did this horrible person.
President Donald Trump in the White House Oval Office at the start of his event with Apple CEO Tim Cook. Down in Georgia, Brigadier General John Lubis, commander of the 3rd Infantry Division and Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield, held a news conference.
This morning, shortly before 11 o'clock, an active duty soldier assigned to Fort Stewart, Georgia, shot and wounded 5 of his fellow soldiers here on Fort Stewart. Thankfully, all are in stable condition and all are expected to recover. The alleged shooter is in custody. We have reestablished security. I have lifted all lockdown measures on Fort Stewart, and there is currently no threat to the local community. I'd like to recognize and thank our Army law enforcement and medical personnel and our partners from local, state, and federal law enforcement and emergency services for their quick response and support. I would also like to thank the brave soldiers who immediately intervened and subdued the shooter. These soldiers, without a doubt, prevented further casualties. Our wounded soldiers were initially evacuated to Wynn Army Community Hospital right here on Fort Stewart. All arrived in stable condition, and 3 of the 5 required surgical intervention. 2 have been transported to Memorial Hospital in Savannah, Georgia for additional care. We have identified the alleged shooter as Sergeant Cornelius Radford, an automated logistics sergeant assigned to 2nd Brigade Combat Team. Sergeant Radford has not previously deployed to combat. Sergeant Radford has been interviewed by the Army Criminal Investigation Division and is currently in pretrial confinement awaiting a charging decision by the Office of the Special Trial Counsel. Right now, our primary focus is first on caring for our injured soldiers and their families, and also supporting the soldiers of the Spartan Brigade. All of the families of the victims have been notified, and we're wrapping our arms around them and ensuring we provide them all the support that we can.
Brigadier General John Lubis, Commander, 3rd Infantry Division and Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield, at a news conference outside the base. During the question and answer period with reporters, he was asked about a possible motive.
Yes, sir.
Russ Bynum with the Associated Press. As best you can, knowing it's still early, can you walk us through where this happened, what happened in the shooting, and were the victims subordinates to the sergeants, or were they people over him in rank?
Yeah, right now it's premature, and we're gathering a lot of the information. What we know is this soldier, the shooting occurred at the soldier's place of work. It did involve his co-workers. We're still not certain about the motivations, but again, he's been interviewed by Army investigators, and we believe we'll gain more information here shortly. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. We don't have any reason to believe it had anything to do with a training event. Other than that, I can't state the motivations for this soldier.
Brigadier General John Lubis, Commander, 3rd Infantry Division and Fort Stewart Hunter Army Airfield, at the base in Georgia. This is Washington Today. And now to the ongoing congressional redistricting fight in Texas, where the Republican governor and the Republican majority in the House and Senate there want to pass a new map that will give Republicans an edge in 5 more U.S. House seats, but Texas House Democrats have left the state to try to deny a quorum for business, and the Republicans are threatening to arrest them, remove them from office, and charge them with bribery if they accept outside money to cover the costs of fines, travel, and lodging. Today, the Texas Senate Select Committee on Congressional Redistricting met for the first time since the new Republican map was revealed. Today was to be for invited witnesses, Thursday for the public. The chair, Phil King, a Republican, said he was disappointed the witnesses did not appear. You're also going to hear from State Senator Chuy Hinojosa, a Democrat.
Just a personal comment here. For the nearly 24 witnesses who did not appear today, invited witnesses, who I think who are very important to the process, we invited them because we trusted that if they had legal or constitutional concerns about the map, that they would come and share those concerns with us in this forum. And again, many of them had testified, a number of them had testified in our regional hearings and had said that they were having difficulty testifying with specifics beyond just the redistricting in general. They were having difficulty testifying on specifics because there wasn't a map available at that time. I had not filed a bill. That map has been filed. It is the same map that the House passed out of committee last week. This is filed as a companion bill, and it has been before us for a number of days. And I had presumed, based on their earlier testimony, that if they have any concerns over legality regarding this map, that they would come today and provide testimony regarding their concerns. Because as we all know in redistricting, now is the time to share such concerns if they exist. And apparently these witnesses have chose not to do that, and in almost all the cases chose not even to respond to our committee invitations. Members, would anyone like to make any comments? Senator Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many of these witnesses that we invited to testify today, many of them testified during the regional hearings, correct?
A number of them did, yes. They all were invited.
And there they expressed some of the concerns with the potential maps that are being considered. as it relates to violations of the Voting Rights Act and the United States Constitution.
I can't remember the specifics of each one's testimony, but in general, as I recall, they testified about the topic of redistricting, but many, as well as many of the citizens who testified, I think we had 205 citizens testify, but many specifically said it's hard to testify because I don't have the map in front of me to point out specific concerns about the map. And we just didn't have one at that time. So going back to my original point, and I understand completely what you're saying. Many of them did express concerns about redistricting in general, but we wanted to give them the opportunity to come and have the map before them and tell us of any concerns they had with regard to the map that the committee is now considering.
But from my recollection, many of those invited witnesses were very specific, expressing their concerns and their allegations of violations of the Voting Rights Act and the United States Constitution. They expressed those concerns, and yes, they didn't have a map in front of them, but as it relates to their concerns and as it relates to redistricting, they were pretty expressive of their main concerns with the proposed redistricting.
Texas State Senator Chuy Hinojosa, a Democrat, and you also heard from State Senator Phil King, Republican, chair of the Redistricting Committee, at today's brief meeting in the state capitol in Austin. The committee adjourned early since there were no witnesses. They are back again for more testimony Thursday. Attorney General of Texas Ken Paxton, a Republican, was on the Steve Bannon Show Tuesday discussing what is being done and will be done when it comes to Texas House Democrats who have left the state.
This is a state issue. I don't know what the FBI would have to do with this. Nothing. This is a purely state issue. So we are focused on alternatives that we can implement at the state level. One of those is we can arrest these. So you will see some action that we will attempt to make those arrests. If that doesn't work, we're also going to give them till Friday, because that's the next day that the legislature meets, to show up on Friday. If they don't, then we are going to file motions to try to remove some of these legislators from office. So that's where we're at now. We'll see what happens. At the very least, I guarantee you this, we can outweight them if these other alternatives don't work, and eventually we'll get the vote that we need.
So, Attorney General Paxton, when you say arrest them, are you going to have like the Texas Rangers go to Illinois and arrest these Democrats and bring them back, or they actually have to be in the state for you to do that?
So, Steve, I can tell you in a couple days exactly what that means. I can't tell you right now. It's part of what's going on. So I would love to be able to tell you the answer to that question, but I have information that I can't share with you yet. But when I can share that, I'd be happy to share it here first.
Attorney General Ken Paxton, Republican, on Steve Bannon's War Room podcast on Tuesday. Bannon is a former advisor in the first Trump White House. Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, who on Tuesday called on the FBI to assist in arresting Texas House Democrats who are out of state, quote tweeted the clip of Ken Paxton and added, "Why would crooked Ken Paxton not want FBI to assist Texas law enforcement? President Trump welcomed it yesterday after I requested that support in a letter to FBI Director Kash Patel. Ken Paxton keeps embarrassing us from his European golf vacation that he can't seem to quit." That was the post from Senator John Cornyn. Paxton is challenging Cornyn in the Republican primary in Cornyn's re-election bid in 2026. Story from the Texas Tribune. Governor Greg Abbott, Republican, on Tuesday asked the Texas Supreme Court to remove Houston State Representative Jean Wu, chair of the House Democratic Caucus, from office, an unprecedented escalation in Republicans' efforts to resume business in the legislature and advance new congressional maps. Jean Wu responded on CNN Tuesday night.
This is just purely insanity. First of all, this is not my seat, and it's sure as hell not Governor Abbott's seat. This seat belongs to the people of the state of Texas. And I've taken multiple oaths to defend them and to protect them at any cost. And what we're looking at is a governor who is conspiring with a disgraced president to use unconstitutional, illegal racial gerrymandering to destroy our communities. I have a duty to respond to that. I have an obligation to do everything I can to stop that using every legal means necessary. More importantly, Governor Abbott is simply ignoring the cries of so many families around the state who have suffered during the Kerrville disaster. And so many other communities are saying, begging for help, asking for him to help them recover. And he has ignored them and instead done his own little political games. It is my moral duty to call this out, to show the entire state what is happening. I would be in neglect of my duty if I was not here.
State Representative of Texas, Jean Wu, a Democrat, on CNN Tuesday night. Joining us now on the phone is Gabby Birenbaum, Texas Tribune Washington correspondent. Thank you so much for being with us. A lot has been happening with this congressional redistricting map standoff in Texas, written by the Republicans. The Democrats are opposing it. Where do things stand?
So currently, as you mentioned, the Democrats have left. Most of them are in Illinois, and the Texas House has come to a standstill, right? They can't conduct their business unless they have a quorum. So right now, the two parties are in a standoff. Some of the prominent Republicans, including the governor and the attorney general in Texas, are trying to use legal means to either compel Democrats to come back or try to vacate their seats, say that they've forfeited their offices. So that's an ongoing legal battle we're monitoring. But as of right now, that's where the two parties stand.
Why Illinois?
I think look at the governor, right? J.B. Pritzker has been enormously sympathetic to their cause. He's appeared in press conferences with these Texas Democrats, and he's one of the many Democrats in state houses around the country calling for Democrats to fight fire with fire. Kathy Hochul was another one. Gavin Newsom has obviously talked about this in California, saying that Democrats, where possible, should do gerrymandering in retaliation for what's going on in Texas.
The threat of arrest, how serious is that? Will Texas law enforcement cross state lines to do it?
Yeah, so the Texas House Speaker, Dustin Burrows, signed arrest warrants for the Democrats who have fled. That's largely symbolic. They don't carry criminal or civil penalties, and they can't be enforced outside of Texas borders. Hence, why they left and why they went to a state like Illinois, where it's, if there was some talk of extradition or something, it's not like Democrats in Illinois would cooperate. And so that's largely a symbolic move. I think what's worth paying attention to, though, for sure, is this effort by Governor Abbott and by the Attorney General to try to declare these offices vacant. They would need a court to agree with them on that. And so we're waiting to see what the court does.
And is that being expedited?
Yeah, so Governor Abbott, started with House Democratic leader Jean Wu to try to vacate Jean Wu's seat. The courts have indicated that they need a response from Wu by Friday. And then on the Attorney General side, Paxton has said he is giving Democrats until Friday to come back, at which point he would initiate legal proceedings.
And in terms of process, so if the seats are declared vacant, that lowers the amount needed for a quorum?
So in that case, the governor would have to call a special election to fill them. And I mean, that would just be such an unprecedented situation that it's unclear exactly how they would proceed. A lot of the legal experts we've talked to have said that, that's the sort of legal remedy that Abbott is seeking here doesn't, they don't expect that to work. Obviously depends. The Texas Supreme Court is all made up of Republican appointees, but they say that the law is pretty clear that quorum breaks are something that's allowed in the Texas Constitution.
The Texas Senate Select Committee on Congressional Redistricting met today. Is it possible for the Senate to go first on this, or does the House need to pass the redistricting map first?
Yeah, so the Senate leader, the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, has said that the Senate is going to sort of proceed on this business, including flood relief, to try to make a statement about the House Democrats who have fled. And so we'll see what happens. But obviously nothing can become law until both chambers pass it. And so I think you'll see this be a sort of protracted standoff between the House Democrats and the Republicans in both chambers.
We've talked about how this issue has gone national. What movement has there been in other states to possibly redistrict there, both of those led by Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah, so we're already seeing on the Republican side, the White House and President Trump's team has been in contact with leaders in Missouri and with Indiana. It's been reported to try to get more to try to get more Republican seats there. In both states, Democrats hold 2 seats, and the vice president is actually going to Indiana to talk about that with the governor there, Governor Brown. On the Democratic side, it's a bit more complicated. You've seen Gavin Newsom in California, Kathy Hochul in New York talk about wanting to disband the independent redistricting commissions that both states have to attempt to draw more seats that are favorable to Democrats, but that could be a lengthy process. In New York, they're talking about a constitutional amendment that wouldn't take effect until the next election cycle, until 2028, if it were passed. In California, they'd have to move really quickly. So they'd have to get a ballot referendum to change the state constitution. And then if that were to pass, then they could proceed. And so to do that, they would need to move in the month of August to get that ballot referendum up and running, which also means they would need to propose a map very shortly.
And also on the federal level, Senator John Cornyn proposing that the FBI get involved in hunting down, if we could use that term, the House Democrats of Texas. Have you heard how serious that is, whether it's legal, whether anything's moving on that?
Yeah, President Trump was asked about that yesterday, and he took a stance that it might have to happen. I think it's unclear, right, what the impetus or the legality would be if they've broken some sort of federal law, right? And that's Republicans have been pushing the theory that Democrats are committing a felony if outside groups are helping fund this, that would be tantamount to bribery. So I think, we're going to see if Republicans try to push that. It's certainly, I think, a possibility that some state House Democrats have talked about, that the Trump administration could try to go after them. That would be a very serious escalation. And so, Trump was sort of open to it, but non-committal in his press conference yesterday.
Gabby Birenbaum, Texas Tribune Washington correspondent. Find her stories at texastribune.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And another story from the Texas Tribune. Texas House Democrats said a bomb threat was made at the hotel outside of Chicago where they're staying, prompting an evacuation Wednesday morning. Texas House Democratic Caucus Chair Gene Wu of Houston said, "We are safe, we are secure, and we are undeterred." He made a joint statement with the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus Chair Ramon Romero and the Black Caucus Chair Barbara Gervin Hawkins. They went on, "We are grateful for Governor Pritzker, local and state law enforcement for their quick action to ensure our safety." That was from the Texas Tribune. From WSFA TV in Selma, Alabama, Wednesday is the 60th anniversary of a landmark piece of legislation, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It was a joyous celebration of 60 years at First Baptist Church in Selma. This landmark piece of legislation prohibited discrimination at the voting booth based on race. It was the powerful images of violence on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma that prompted Congress to pass the law. Voting rights activists hoping to march peacefully to Montgomery were instead met by state law enforcement armed with billy clubs and tear gas. That was from WSFA TV in Selma. Congresswoman Terry Sewell, Democrat from Alabama, representing that area, put out this video today on X.
Today, 60 years ago, President Lyndon Baines Johnson signed into law the Voting Rights Act of 1965. 60 years later, I would have never guessed that I would be a member of Congress and I would be carrying the seminal piece of legislation to restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I think it goes to show you that progress is elusive, and every generation must fight and fight again to hold on to the progress that we've made and to advance it. I know that as long as I am blessed to be a member of Congress, and as long as the people of Alabama's 7th Congressional District elect me, I will continue to fight for the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to be passed into law. I think all of you know that I've been carrying that bill since 2013. And every successive Congress after Congress after Congress, I filed it. We've passed it twice under Democratic majorities in the House, and it always stalled in the Senate. I know that public sentiment means everything. I hope that we will all galvanize around the need for voter protection. I remember the last time John Lewis was on the bridge, he was very frail. His body was riddled with cancer, but with a very strong voice, John Lewis left a message that I hope all of us will take to heart. He said, "Never give up, never give in, keep the faith, keep your eyes on the prize." John also said that we must all get into good trouble because voting rights and voting is the most important nonviolent tool in our democracy. So let's use it so we don't lose it.
Congresswoman Terry Sewell, Democrat from Alabama, posting that video on X. This is Washington Today. Start from the New York Times. President Trump intends to meet in person with President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia as soon as next week, and he plans to follow up shortly afterward with a meeting between himself, Mr. Putin, and President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, according to two people familiar with the plan. Mr. Trump disclosed his plans in a call with European leaders on Wednesday. The people said the meetings would include only those three men and would not include any European counterparts. That was from the New York Times. And from Axios, President Trump imposed penalties over Russia's invasion of Ukraine for the first time on Wednesday, while also striking an optimistic note about the potential for progress. Shortly after White House envoy Steve Witkoff met Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin on Wednesday, President Trump signed an order doubling tariffs on India to 50% over its purchases of Russian oil and paving the way for similar penalties for other countries. But hours later, he posted that there had been great progress made in the Putin-Witkoff meeting and that further work toward ending the war would take place in the days and weeks to come. That was from Axios. President Trump said in an interview on CNBC on Tuesday that the additional tariffs on India were coming.
With India, what people don't like to say about India, they're the highest tariff nation. They have the highest tariff of anybody. We do very, very little business with India because their tariffs are so high. So India has not been a good trading partner because they do a lot of business with us, but we don't do business with them. So we settled on 25%, but I think I'm going to raise that very substantially over the next 24 hours because they're buying Russian oil, they're fueling the war machine, and if they're going to do that, then I'm not going to be happy.
President Donald Trump interviewed on CNBC on Tuesday, previewing today's announcement that the tariff will double to 50%. Again, from the Axios article, with the India tariffs, Trump jumped the gun on his ceasefire or sanctions deadline for Putin, which was supposed to expire on Friday. Trump said the 50% tariffs would be effective August 27th and that other countries could face tariffs if they keep buying Russian oil. He didn't say whether China, Russia's other top customer, would face a similar penalty to India. New Delhi has said it won't cut off supplies of Russian oil and accused Western countries of hypocrisy over their own economic ties with Russia. That was from an article at Axios. A member of the Indian National Congress, Shashi Tharoor, spoke about the tariffs today on Asian News International.
But, there is unfortunately a certain double standard involved. They have given the Chinese a 90-day break, but the Chinese are importing far more Russian oil than we are. So clearly this has not been a particularly friendly gesture from a country we thought was well disposed towards us, or an administration that we thought was well disposed. Very clearly we have to act accordingly, and we will have to learn our lessons from this experience. I think there is certainly a likelihood there will be some pressure within India now to impose comparable reciprocal tariffs on American exports to India. So I think we're going to have to really start looking at other trading partners much more in these circumstances.
Shashi Tharoor, member of the Indian National Congress, also a former United Nations Undersecretary, today in an interview on Asian News International. Reuters writing that analysts said Trump's move marks the most serious downturn in U.S.-India relations since his return to office in January. The tariffs threaten to disrupt India's access to its largest export market, where shipments totaled nearly $87 billion in 2024, hitting sectors like textiles, footwear, gems, and jewelry. That was from Reuters. Wall Street today, the Dow up 81, S&P up 45, and NASDAQ up 252. President Trump's tariff policy was discussed today by Arthur Laffer, who was an economic advisor to former President Ronald Reagan, and in 2016, an advisor to the first Trump presidential campaign. Arthur Laffer was at the Young America's Foundation National Conservative Student Conference in Washington.
Hello. Thanks for coming. My name is Ben. I'm from MSU Denver, and I took 2 economics classes this last semester. I took a macroeconomics, and then I took a microeconomics as well, and nobody had anything good to say about trades, particularly about tariffs, particularly about how tariffs won't lead to growth. One of the things you mentioned was free trade, so I would like to know how tariffs are going to lead us to free trade, and what do you see as valuable that I can bring up to people when they start bashing tariffs?
Yeah, well, I think in case of tariffs, now let me just say free trade is always with a quotation mark around it. I do not believe we should sell nuclear weapons to Kim Jong-un. Okay, let's just start right there. There are some boundaries on that. When you look at trade, there are two benefits that come from trade. The one I mentioned too, which is the carding gain. We make some things better than they do, and they make some things better than we do. That's a really important gain. The other important gain is that is what's called the Alexander gains from trade, which is the transfer of resources from one country to another. I mentioned that to you as well. Europe gave us a lot of trade. We had trade deficits with Europe from 1640 until 1870. We ran trade deficits every single year except for 7 years out of that 230 years. They supplied us with the capital to be able to build the country. Those are huge, huge, important gains from trade. And what you really need to do is understand that our tariffs are bad for us as well as foreigners, and foreign tariffs are bad for us as well as foreigners. No matter who puts those tariffs, how do you get foreigners to come to the table? That's the issue. Now, when you look at these foreigners who look at the U.S., all they care about is the U.S. market. And this literally. So how do you bring them to the table? What Donald Trump has done, I think, is negotiation by threatening tariffs on them to bring them to the table to negotiate trade agreements. As you can see, he's now accomplished a number of trade agreements. It's not over yet. Believe me, it's going to go on and on and on. My view is that Donald Trump understands this issue better than anyone in politics. I personally have talked to him about it a number of times, going through just what I talk about with you guys here today, literally, on that. He's also very capable. He's an international businessman. I don't know of any company, business person who is international who doesn't love free trade. I don't. And also, in one of my conversations with him, I probably shouldn't have done this. Just don't tell anyone, please. But I said, of course you're a free trader, Mr. President. I mean, you imported 2 foreign wives. He didn't laugh, by the way. I get just joking. No, I think what you do is, how do you get to freer trade? It's not going to happen voluntarily. Now, John F. Kennedy did it, Ronald Reagan did it, and Donald Trump, I think, is going to do it too, by negotiating with them, by threatening them with more protectionism and getting them to lower the barrier. Already, if you look at the Japanese deal, a lot of the non-tariff barriers have been removed. I think he's going to continue this process. Do not for a moment think that the banging and clumping and plinking, all of this going on is ever going to stop. The smoke is never going to clear. The dust is never going to settle. This is like coming down a mountain in a Conestoga wagon without a driver, and we're a rocky thing, and you're sitting there just banged around. You're going to be under a constant negotiation. But when the dust does clear, when the end of the day comes, I think you're going to see much freer trade with the U.S. with the rest of the world and working in cooperation. I also love the way he uses trade as a leverage with regard to a place like Russia or China or Yemen or North Korea. I mean, it's Ronald Reagan's peace through strength.
Economist Arthur Laffer, most famous for advising former President Ronald Reagan about supply-side economics and his Laffer curve, describing the relationship between tax rates and government revenue, speaking today at the Young America's Foundation National Conservative Student Conference in Washington, D.C. Art Laffer was also an advisor to the Donald Trump presidential campaign in 2016. Washington Today continues in a moment.
America marks 250 years, and C-SPAN is there to commemorate every moment, from the signing of the Declaration of Independence to the voices shaping our nation's future. We bring you unprecedented, all-platform coverage, exploring the stories, sights, and spirit that make up America. Join us for remarkable coast-to-coast coverage celebrating our nation's journey like no other network can. America 250. Over a year of historic moments, only on the C-SPAN networks.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Associated Press reporting a federal judge heard arguments Wednesday over whether to stop construction of an immigration detention center built in the middle of the Florida Everglades and dubbed Alligator Alcatraz because it didn't follow environmental laws. The suit claims the project threatens environmentally sensitive wetlands that are home to protected plants and animals and would reverse billions of dollars worth of environmental restoration. In another story about this facility from CBS News, dozens of emergency calls made from inside the federal detention center known as Alligator Alcatraz are offering a rare look at what's happening behind the walls of one of the nation's most controversial immigration facilities. The nearly 70 calls were released to CBS News Miami after a public records request to the sheriff's office. They include reports of medical emergencies, internal confusion over procedures, and a large number of accidental 911 calls placed from staff members' phones. That was from CBS News. This came up today when U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan met with reporters outside the White House.
Mr. Homan, Scripps News has learned that there was a major medical incident at Alligator Alcatraz.
Major what?
Major medical incident at Alligator Alcatraz.
What was it?
What could you tell us about that?
I can tell you I went to Alligator Alcatraz 2 days ago, and I'm sick and tired of false stories about Alligator Alcatraz. Someone asked me the other day that the priest wasn't allowed in to get mass. Wrong. They got the records in. They showed me the records. Clergy had been allowed on there. And I walked through the medical facility there. Not one person was in the trauma unit at all. I talked to the head medical person, shared with me, what they're getting is some people don't, a stomach ache or nothing serious has happened there. And if something serious is happening, they got a helicopter right there to take people to the nearest trauma center. So what I saw was a well-run facility. And the reason I went down there is because I get asked these questions all the time about the terrible, terrible Alligator Alcatraz. I went down there, and what I found out is there's a lot of fake stories out there about medical attention, about religious freedom and having clergy there. I went down there. I looked at it. I looked at the books. So it's simply a false story.
Will you start using the name Speedway Slammer after the IndyCar rejected it?
Can you say a word about reassigning the
Look, I don't name the facilities, but I'll say this: the work of ICE, the men and women of ICE are trying to do their job with integrity and honor. I don't want these names to detract from that. So not naming the facilities, but I wasn't involved in that, but I want people to focus on the hard work and the dangerous work the men and women of ICE are doing. And they're doing the integrity of honor, and I want us to stick to that. And so I don't want the names taking over the great work they're doing. This is serious work and it's dangerous work, so I want to stick with that.
Can you give a reaction to the judge considering halting operations at Alligator Alcatraz over environmental concerns?
I don't understand the environmental concerns are, because I was down there. So they take waste out of there every day. They're not having any impact. They haven't put 1 foot of concrete down that wasn't already there. I mean, the airport was already there. Runway was already there. They're moving waste in and out every day. They're moving, sewage water in and out every day. So I don't see any environmental impact. Again, if the judge is going to make that ruling, go down there and look at it yourself. I'm sick and tired of the radical judges trying to shut down everything we're doing. It's ridiculous. I thought the Supreme Court was pretty clear last month about these radical judges trying to, stop the Trump administration from implementing our agenda that American people voted for.
U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan at a news conference in the White House driveway. U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem begins an Indianapolis Star article announced August 5th that the Trump administration's next Alligator Alcatraz will be Indiana's Miami Correctional Facility, dubbing it the Speedway Slammer. From NBC News, the Trump administration is terminating 22 contracts focused on developing mRNA vaccines and winding down additional federal investments in mRNA technology. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced Tuesday many scientists and infectious disease experts swiftly denounced the move as a broadside on an area of research seen as particularly promising after its use in rapidly developing COVID vaccines. The projects that are being axed were funded by BARDA, the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, a Department of Health and Human Services program that works with the pharmaceutical industry to develop vaccines and other countermeasures for public health emergencies. That was from NBC News. Secretary Kennedy explained why this is being done in a video posted Tuesday night.
Most of these shots are for flu or COVID, but as the pandemic showed us, mRNA vaccines don't perform well against viruses that infect the upper respiratory tract. Here's the problem. mRNA only codes for a small part of the viral proteins, usually a single antigen. One mutation and the vaccine becomes ineffective. This dynamic drives a phenomenon called antigenic shift, meaning that the vaccine paradoxically encourages new mutations and can actually prolong pandemics as the virus constantly mutates to escape the protective effects of the vaccine. Millions of people, maybe even you or someone you know, caught the Omicron variant despite being vaccinated. That's because a single mutation can make mRNA vaccines ineffective. The same risk applies to flu. After reviewing the science and consulting top experts at NIH and FDA, HHS has determined that mRNA technology poses more risks than benefits for these respiratory viruses. That's why, after extensive review, BARDA has begun the process of terminating these 22 contracts totaling just under $500 million. To replace the troubled mRNA programs, we're prioritizing the development of safer, broader vaccine strategies, like whole virus vaccines and novel platforms that don't collapse when viruses mutate. Let me be absolutely clear. HHS supports safe, effective vaccines for every American who wants them. That's why we're moving beyond the limitations of mRNA for respiratory viruses and investing in better solutions.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. posting that video Tuesday night. An Associated Press article about his announcement has this paragraph. Speaking hours later Tuesday at a news conference in Anchorage, Alaska, alongside the state's two Republican U.S. senators, Kennedy said work is underway on an alternative. He said a universal vaccine that mimics natural immunity is the administration's focus. He said it could be effective. We believe it's going to be effective against not only coronavirus, but also flu. That was from Associated Press. Dr. Paul Offit, director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania and also an FDA advisor, was on MSNBC today.
Well, it's a sad day for science in this country. The mRNA vaccines saved our lives. It was estimated that in 2021, you were 12 times more likely to be hospitalized and die if you didn't get a vaccine than if you did. In 2022, you were 6 times more likely to be hospitalized and die. It's a phenomenal technology, and it was remarkably safe. I mean, I'm on the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee. When we looked at those data in December of 2020, we were only looking at 35,000 people who had received that vaccine. All of us were worried that the other shoe was going to drop, that there was going to be a much more serious side effect that we would see when millions of people, and now hundreds of millions of people, were vaccinated. And that wasn't true. Although the vaccine could cause myocarditis, meaning inflammation of the heart muscle, it was rare and it was transient and self-resolving and short-lived, as distinct from the virus, which could cause myocarditis, which could cause you to be hospitalized, go to the intensive care unit, and die. It is a remarkable technology, and not only for COVID and not only for infectious diseases, but also for cancer, for gene therapy, and eliminating all of this research and development at BARDA is a tragic mistake that is not based on a science-based decision.
Dr. Paul Offit, director of the Vaccine Education Center at Children's Hospital in Pennsylvania, on MSNBC. Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, writing on X today, President Trump and RFK's recklessness will deprive Americans of life-saving medicines like cancer treatment. Abandoning proven science is a gift to foreign countries and makes America less safe. Another article from AP, Dateline, Nashville, Tennessee. Republican U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn announced on Wednesday that she is entering the open Tennessee governor's race in 2026, setting up a primary clash with Congressman John Rose. Blackburn's announcement makes official what had been expected for some time from the ally of President Donald Trump. She has made no secret that she was planning on running for the position. It sets up a Republican primary clash in August 2026 against Rose, who is also a Trump backer. They'll be competing to replace Republican Governor Bill Lee, who is hitting his limit of 2 4-year terms in office. That was from AP. Senator Blackburn posted an announcement video. It begins with President Trump at a rally. You don't hear him, but you see women holding signs that read, "Women for Trump."
Trump is back, America is blessed, and Tennessee better than ever. I'm Marcia Blackburn. Here in the volunteer state, we always lead the way. And that's why I am announcing my candidacy for governor. Tennessee is the greatest place in the world to rear a family, make a life and a living, and together we can make our great state even better. We'll make Tennessee America's #1 job-creating, energy-producing powerhouse. Deliver a world-class education for our children by empowering parents, not the deep state. And whether it takes planes, trains, or starships, we'll deport illegal aliens because respect for the law starts with enforcing it. This is Tennessee. We'll honor the Constitution, we'll value life, and we'll define our boys and girls the way God made them. I love Tennessee, I believe in Tennesseans, and I'm ready to deliver the kind of conservative leadership that will ensure our state is America's conservative leader for this generation and the next. I'm Marcia Blackburn, I'm running for governor, and I would be honored to have your support.
Senator Blackburn is a Republican, posting that video today. Earlier this year, Congressman John Rose, Republican of Tennessee, announced he is running for governor. So there's a primary that's going to happen at least between those two. And Congressman Rose was on WTN radio in Nashville today.
Were you surprised today when you saw Marcia Blackburn's announcement?
A little bit surprised. You know, she just got elected to a fresh 6-year term in the Senate, and I think Tennesseans sent her there to do a job. And so I thought at the end of the day that she probably would decide to fulfill that obligation and serve out those 6 years. So I'm a little surprised, not shocked. Frankly, she's been saying she was thinking about it, and her team has been out working. Probably the most active re-election campaign for the Senate 6 years out that I've seen. And so, sending signals that they might be really serious about this.
Does it change how you're going to run your race now?
I think it does. I mean, obviously, I've been the only major candidate in the race now for going on 5 months. And so, it's hard to get people interested in thinking about an election that's 1 year away. Today's the 1 year mark. I assume probably not a coincidence. And so, when you're visiting with people and the race is that far out, it's kind of hard to get them ginned up thinking about it. So now I think with perhaps the field being set, there could be others, I suppose, but I think it's safe to say this might be most of the field, if not all the field. So I think Tennesseans will now start to zero in on trying to make the decision about who they want to hire to be the chief executive officer of Tennessee.
Congressman John Rose, Republican of Tennessee, on WTN radio in Nashville today. BBC News reports a silent prayer was held in Japan on Wednesday morning as it marked 80 years since the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba attended the ceremony on Wednesday along with officials from around the world and the city's mayor. The mayor warned of a global accelerating trend toward military buildup and the idea that nuclear weapons are essential for national defense, saying this was a flagrant disregard of the lessons the international community should have learned from the tragedies of history. World War II ended with Japan's surrender after the dropping of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombs killed more than 200,000 people, some from the immediate blast and others from radiation sickness and burns. That was from the BBC News article. Reuters posted a few clips of the Japanese Prime Minister's speech with English interpretation.
As Prime Minister, I would like to offer my sincerest condolences to the souls of those who fell victim to the atomic bomb. And I would also like to offer my heartfelt sympathy to the survivors who are still suffering from the after effects of the atomic bombing. We must not repeat the tragedy that was brought upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It is our country's responsibility, as the only nation that have suffered atomic bombings, to uphold the 3 non-nuclear principles and lead the global initiative for a world without nuclear weapons. I pledge to work with all my strength for a world without nuclear wars and weapons, as well as eternal peace.
Through an interpreter, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, part of his speech at the Peace Memorial Ceremony in Hiroshima on this 80th anniversary of the first use of a nuclear weapon by the U.S. during World War II. That video had a couple of clips of the speech as compiled by Reuters. The U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce, during her news conference on Tuesday, was asked about today's anniversary.
August 6 marks 80 years since the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The U.S. ambassador to Japan will also participate in the event in Hiroshima. Do you have any comment on that? And what is the current administration's basic policy on nuclear weapons? Thank you.
Yes, I do have a remark on that. Thank you, sir. So for tomorrow, 80 years ago, the United States and Japan concluded a devastating war in the Pacific. For 80 years, the United States and Japan, however, have stood shoulder to shoulder to safeguard peace and prosperity in the Pacific. Tomorrow marks a solemn day of reflection and remembrance as we honor the people of Hiroshima and their enduring message of peace and hope. For 80 years, their resilience has inspired the world, and their spirit of reconciliation has strengthened the U.S.-Japan alliance and our shared commitment to peace and prosperity. Today, our two nations stand together as close allies, facing the future with unity and purpose. By embracing the promise of possibility, we have forged a partnership that serves as a beacon of freedom and progress for the world. It is, if I may just add, that it is a perfect example of the nature of what can be accomplished with two nations when we work together, and the nature of friendship, the beauty of Japan, and the fact that we can stand here 80 years later and speak to that. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here, sir.
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce at her news conference in Washington on Tuesday, talking about today's 80th anniversary of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima during World War II. Pope Leo XIV said today about the Hiroshima bombing and the second nuclear bombing of Nagasaki in Japan on August 9, 1945. Time passes, but those tragic events remain a universal warning against the devastation caused by wars, and in particular by nuclear weapons. I hope that in today's world marked by strong tensions and bloody conflicts, the illusion of security based on the threat of mutual destruction will give way to the instruments of justice, the practice of dialogue, and trust in fraternity. That was from Pope Leo XIV. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.